Steph, Caregivers Chronicles Unveiled, the critical care unit for caregivers. Real conversations, real care, real healing. Doc Steph, I see your hands holding the weight of 100 plans. Soft in the dark, strong in the light. You make it feel a little more right. Take a breath.
Hey, most caregivers expect to become tired. Few expect to become emotionally exhausted from caring. So, as caregivers, we often accept exhaustion as part of the journey. We expect sleepless nights, changing schedules, unexpected emergencies, and the emotional challenges that come with caring for someone we love or even in the caregiving profession. What many of us do not expect is the gradual depletion that can occur within us over time. So, the reality is that caregiving not only affects the person receiving care, it affects us as well. Have you ever felt emotionally drained, mentally exhausted, or struggled to find the same patience and energy you once had? Have you ever wondered why something that began as an act of love now feels increasingly difficult to sustain? So, today we're talking about compassion fatigue and what happens when the care we give to others begins draining the life out of us. So, welcome to Caregivers Chronicles Unveiled. I am Doc Steph. And one of the reasons I wanted to discuss compassion fatigue is that many caregivers experience it without realizing what it is. We often recognize physical exhaustion because we can feel it in our bodies. We recognize stress by identifying the pressures we are facing. Yet, compassion fatigue can quietly develop beneath the surface while we continue doing what needs to be done. As caregivers, we become accustomed to focusing on others' needs. We monitor symptoms, coordinate appointments, manage medications, provide emotional support, and take on responsibility most people never see because our attention is directed outward. We may fail to notice what caregiving is doing to us internally. The longer caregiving continues, the greater risk that we begin neglecting our own emotional, psychological, physical, and spiritual well-being. That is why this conversation matters. Before we can address compassion fatigue, we must first understand what it is and why it happens. Passion fatigue is the emotional, psychological, physical, and spiritual exhaustion that develops when we spend extended periods caring for people who are suffering, struggling, or dependent upon us without adequately restoring ourselves. Some professionals describe compassion fatigue as the cost of caring. I believe that that phrase helps us understand the nature of the problem. Compassion fatigue does not develop because we do not care. In many cases, it develops because we care deeply. So, as caregivers, we often carry more than responsibilities. We carry concerns, we carry uncertainty, we even carry fears about the future. We carry the emotional weight of watching someone we love struggle with illness, disability, aging, or chronic health condition. And it doesn't matter if it isn't a person that you love, and it may be just the position or profession that you're in caregiving, that you also care deeply about the person that's under your care. So when someone we care about is hurting, we hurt. When they are afraid, we worry. When they experience setbacks, we experience disappointment alongside them. This ongoing emotional connection is one of the reasons caregiving can be so meaningful. It is also one of the reasons caregiving can become emotionally exhausting. From a psychological perspective, compassion fatigue arises because our emotional resources are finite. Human beings are designed to respond to periods of stress. However, caregiving often places us in a prolonged state of emotional engagement. Many of us spend months or years anticipating problems before they occur. We remain alert to changes in health, behavior, mood, or circumstances. We are constantly evaluating situations, making decisions, solving problems, and adjusting plans. Even when we are physically away from the person receiving care, part of our attention often remains focused on them. Psychologists refer to some of this as emotional labor. And emotional labor involves managing our own emotions while simultaneously responding to others' emotions and needs. Think about how often we reassure others while feeling uncertain ourselves. Or think about how often we remain calm during a crisis while struggling internally. Or think about how often we encourage someone else when we ourselves are discouraged. That emotional work requires energy. The challenge is that many caregivers continue giving without intentionally replenishing what has been poured out. Eventually, the emotional reservoir that has sustained us begins running low. This is why compassion fatigue is different from ordinary stress. It is also why compassion fatigue differs from burnout. Many people use those terms interchangeably, but they are not the same. Burnout is generally associated with chronic stress, overwhelming responsibilities, and excessive demands. Burnout often leaves us feeling frustrated, overwhelmed, and exhausted by everything we have to do. Compassion fatigue, however, develops through our ongoing exposure to another person's suffering. A caregiver experiencing burnout may feel overwhelmed by the responsibilities, but a caregiver experiencing compassion fatigue may feel emotionally depleted from carrying the weight of another person's pain. Then burnout is often connected to what we do, but compassion fatigue is connected to what we carry. So, understanding this distinction is important because many caregivers try to address compassion fatigue by simply working harder, becoming more organized, or pushing through exhaustion. Unfortunately, compassion fatigue is not a productivity problem. It is an emotional depletion problem. One of the greatest dangers of compassion fatigue is that it affects the whole person. Physically, we may notice fatigue, headaches, sleep disturbances, digestive issues, muscle tension, or weakened immune systems. Emotionally, we may become more irritable, impatient, frustrated, or withdrawn. Mentally, we may struggle with concentration, decision making, and maintaining perspective. And socially, we may begin distancing ourselves from friends, activities, and relationships that once brought us joy. Then spiritually, we may find ourselves wrestling with difficult questions about purpose, responsibility, guilt, and rest. The impact extends far beyond feeling tired. Compassion fatigue affects how we live, think, relate to others, and view ourselves. One of the things that surprised me during my own caregiving journey was how gradually these changes occurred. There was no single moment when I realized I was becoming emotionally exhausted. I continued showing up, I continued handling responsibilities, and I continued doing what needed to be done. From the outside, everything probably looked normal, yet internally, the cumulative effect of caregiving was beginning to take its toll. I found myself holding on to concerns long after the day was over, even during moments when I should have been resting. My mind remained occupied with responsibilities, decisions, and uncertainties. Looking back, I realized that I had become so focused on caring for others that I really stopped to ask myself a simple question: how am I doing? Not as a caregiver, not as a problem solver, not as the person everyone depends on, but as a person. It's the same when someone asks about the person you care about. They don't ask about, they don't say, how are you doing? I believe many of us can relate to that experience. We become so accustomed to caring for everyone else that we stop paying attention to ourselves. So, but one thing that I learned, and I made throughout these podcasts, give you a little encouragement through scripture, because that's what kept me. Not at all times, though, but I continued in my faith. That's what helped get me through. Jesus offers an invitation in Matthew 11, verses 28 through 30, that speaks directly to the reality many caregivers face. And it says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." I find it interesting that Jesus does not criticize the weary. He does not tell them to work harder. He does not suggest that exhaustion is evidence of weak faith. Instead, he acknowledges their burden and offers rest. Sometimes rest feels uncomfortable. We often feel guilty when we slow down. We may even believe that caring for ourselves somehow takes away from caring for others, or we do not have time. Yet, the truth is that restoration is necessary. If we continually pour out without replenishing ourselves, eventually compassion runs dry. So, as we close this conversation, I want to leave you with this thought: compassion fatigue does not begin because we stop caring. More often, it develops because we have cared deeply for a very long time without adequately caring for ourselves. So, awareness is the first step toward healing. Before we can address what is happening around us, we must become aware of what is happening within us. So, I want to encourage you to pause and ask yourself a question caregivers often forget to ask: how am I really doing? The answer may reveal more than you realize, because we are so used to saying, I'm good, I'm okay. But if you ask yourself that question, you can truthfully say, I am not okay. So thank you for joining me for this episode of Caregivers Chronicles Unveiled. I am Doc Steph, and I hope today's conversation helps you understand that compassion fatigue is not a personal failure. It may simply be a sign that you have been holding more than you were designed to carry alone. So join me next time as we discuss the signs you should not ignore and explore how compassion fatigue often reveals itself long before we recognize it. So join in on the conversation and share your story. Peace and blessing.
Real conversations, real care, real healing.